we are now at a point where the United States realized that it's failed. It's pulling out of this elaborate and intricate system that it's built in the last 30 years, where its troops are everywhere, its influence is everywhere, and it's trying to exert its will on the last, what they believe are the last obstacles before everyone is like them, before everyone is a capitalist, and before money and the rise in standards of living just cancels the differences between people, which has been a theory that has utterly failed. And in that vacuum, as America is pulling back, you start to see that regional powers come in to those vacuums. The first one, obviously, being Russia going into Ukraine, and this is just the beginning. That entire region is just getting started. It's going to be decades of regional wars in that area. Secondly is the Middle East, where America has pulled out of Iraq, Afghanistan, and now they're not even monitoring the open seas. They're allowing Yemenites with rubber boats to interrupt global commerce. So clearly, the Bretton Woods role of the United States is gone.
Lior, welcome back to RTD Interviews.
Happy to be back.
Well, I appreciate you as always taking time with me. I like to check in with you at least once a quarter, just to see what you're keeping an eye on, as well as get your thoughts on future projections on what to expect in the markets. And so, as always, man, I hope all is well with you, and looking forward to at this current moment, based upon what you're keeping your eyes on, things that concern you, excite you. Let's just dive into it. So, what are some things you're keeping an eye on that the audience must basically pay attention to as well?
I think that the most important event of the year is going to be the U.S. elections. There's no doubt that the United States it's basically as divided as it's been certainly since World War II. And that is creating a number of dynamics that are unprecedented, definitely in my lifetime. But I would say that we haven't seen these dynamics over 100 years. Let me kind of touch upon a number of them, if you don't mind. And then the audience can understand where I'm coming from. One thing that is definitely happening from a bipartisan perspective is that the United States has a clear set of priorities in terms of its enemies. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, America reached a stage where it elected a 45-year-old saxophone player because he promised to be the future. In that elections, Clinton ran against one of the most experienced, well-diverse, just experts on strategy that the United States had to offer, which was George W. Bush Sr., one of the founders of the CIA, one of the top-ranking officials at the UN, an extremely well-rounded person. But he represented the past. He represented the Cold War, and America wanted to go forward. The idea was, if we beat the communists and look at what's happening in Eastern Europe, everybody wants to be us. Everybody wants to be America. Then basically, who's going to fight us? What's going to be our next war? We have no real threats. Let's try to create a globalization of everyone. And in true American form, discarding so many of the differences between cultures, religions, and otherwise, they assumed that everybody wanted to be them. And they got it wrong, terribly wrong, so wrong that they propped up their enemies. And by 2011, this became apparent with China. After 2008, both China and Russia and many other countries realized that, hey, if 2008 can happen in the United States, maybe capitalism is not the one-all be-all. And we saw a huge breakup in terms of ideologies. And this is why Trump got elected, basically. Trump got elected because the sentiment in America also changed. To Americans just didn't understand what Washington was doing. What was the policy? What was the vision? Where are we going? And this got accentuated by the pandemic. The pandemic was supposed to be the most unifying event, a global virus that spread everywhere and can create these international collaborations, but it did not. It created finger pointing, and Sweden never closing down, and on the other side, China closing down for 2 years more than anybody else. So clearly, this clash of civilizations was symbolized by how you handle a virus, which is supposed to be something very non-political and neutral, right? It's a health issue. And we are now at a point where the United States realized that it's failed. It's pulling out of this elaborate and intricate system that it's built in the last 30 years, where its troops are everywhere, its influence is everywhere, and it's trying to exert its will on the last, what they believe are the last obstacles before everyone is like them, before everyone is a capitalist, and before money and the rise in standards of living just cancels the differences between people, which has been a theory that has utterly failed. And in that vacuum, as America is pulling back, you start to see that regional powers come in to those vacuums. The first one, obviously, being Russia going into Ukraine, and this is just the beginning. That entire region is just getting started. It's going to be decades of regional wars in that area. Secondly is the Middle East, where America has pulled out of Iraq, Afghanistan, and now they're not even monitoring the open seas. They're allowing Yemenites with rubber boats to interrupt global commerce. So clearly, the Bretton Woods role of the United States is gone. This is going to impact Australia and Japan in the region of China. It's going to impact India. It's obviously going to impact, and it is impacting Europe and Africa and everywhere else. We are moving into a world where the United States is no longer trying to maintain global order. What it is doing instead is pulling back. Now, it's not isolating completely, but it's certainly pulling away from doing the heavy lifting instead of other countries. It wants other countries to militarize and arm themselves and fight their own battles. And in that environment, the United States is now taking back all of the competitive advantages that they were willingly giving away and sacrificing their middle class. And that is creating a huge worker shortage in America that's being addressed by the Biden administration with just an open border policy to mitigate it. It's changing the social construct. It's creating half of the country to antagonize this blatant open border policy. And it's creating a lot of inflation because in order to be, again, number one in industry, the amount of infrastructure that needs to be modernized is incredible. And the Inflation Reduction Act is just one. The next president, be it another term of Biden or if Trump ends up victorious, you're going to see a lot more of this. America is going back to business and pulling out of trying to sort things out for everybody else. And that's the world we're moving into. So in that world, you're going to see the rise or the comeback of a lot of regional powers. And that means a lot more wars and a lot more inflation and a lot more commodity supply constraints and everything else. We are basically going back about 100 years in terms of our, not in terms of technologically and standard of living and everything, but in terms of the way that the world works, where you have a number of powers. The United States will be the strongest and the mightiest, and no one will threaten it, not militarily or economically, but still it will not choke fires in all other regions of the world. This is not what you're going to see.
All right. Now, you mentioned a moment ago about the world, I guess, waking up or realizing that we're no longer in a Bretton Woods ruled ecosystem or world. So if that is the case, then the whole Bretton Woods concept was centered around the dollar being the global hegemonic tool that the world would be forced to use.
Yes.
So if that's the case, waking up, if the rest of the world's waking up, what's going to be the option? What would people use, or what would be ushered in as an option for people to use, real briefly?
Yeah, great question. And sorry for interrupting you, but what I wanted to just say is that the word wasn't force. The United States came out the clear victor of World War II along with the Soviets. But for the Europeans who feared that Stalin was on their continent, not an ocean away, has imperial ambitions and that he will not pull back of any ground that he has taken it and will want to increase it, for them, the Americans offering them the Marshall Plan was a blessing. America could have just kept its troops in Europe and you would not have modern day Europe if America treated it like an empire. Instead, it told the Europeans, we are going to build you up. We will make you functioning again. Now, the way we would do this is we would create trust on the open seas, universal systems of commerce and business and everything else. In fact, the delegates from France and England and in Western Germany, etc., when they came to Bretton Woods and heard all that, they thought it was a practical joke. No other superpower has ever acted in that manner. Now, when you take away the need for trading under the dollar system, it doesn't mean that all countries are going to pull away from it. The dollar is by far the best fiat currency. So most countries are going to just choose to remain on a dollar system, but they will not need to hoard it. But when they do that, they can't diversify out of it into other fiat currencies as much. They might diversify a little bit into regional leading currencies, but for the most part, what you're seeing is central banks buying gold, because that is a true money that everybody can rely on. It doesn't matter your politics, you can rely on gold. So that's one thing that's happening right now. It's driving gold to 2400. So we are not moving away from the dollar system just because there's no other system. In the next 20, 30 years, you will see more systems that start to compete with the dollar. It's just something that's going to happen. The United States is not trying to remain the sole reserve currency. It's sanctioning 40 countries. It's weaponizing the dollar in ways that make it disadvantageous for other countries to bet just on that.
Right. And speaking of which, I bring up the gold chart right now. So as of right now, this is what we're looking at gold wise in USD terms. And so as you mentioned, gold is now being used as an option for nations to, I guess, use as a alternative along with having dollars. And so right now, at all time, having reached an all-time high, cooling down a little bit, reaching up at a high of 24,000 or 2,400. $25. To you, when you saw that, was
Don't
it
get the people excited.
I know. Was it a surprise to you, or did you like kind of foresee like this type of price movement happening, given all the things you just described, or what?
On April 1st, 2019, we put out an article on wealthresearchgroup.com, which is basically the signature newsletter that we have. And we said gold was just declared tier 1 instead of tier 3, which means that central banks now hold it in collateral 100%, just like the US dollar and treasury bonds. It is now deemed the safest asset in the world. If that is true, then the price that it trades at today, meaning April 1st, 2019, is half of what it's really worth. On April 1st, 2019, it was worth $1,291 an ounce. So we said it's going to $2,582 an ounce. So I'm not surprised that it's trading at 23 or 2,400. It's going higher because there's another big buyer that came into the table apart from central banks in the last 3 or 4 months here.
That big buyer, what were you referring to, if you don't mind? What was that? What big buyer?
In the last 40 years, the CCP has convinced the Chinese population 4 walls as being a safe haven, that they can rely on real estate and housing to maintain their savings and wealth. As you know, in China, people don't put money on the stock market. They don't have, like in America, where you can do research on a business, a phenomenal world-class business, and just easily own a piece of it for the rest of your life. It's not something that the Chinese people even consider as a form of savings. To them, they don't trust anything, and they like precious metals. But the CCP convinced them that real estate could be their way out. And for the last 40 years, they built so much housing there that on average, every citizen has 2 apartments. They've overbuilt, and they've used it to about 25% of GDP. Just to put that in context, when the subprime mortgage crisis happened in the United States, it was 8% of GDP. China is dealing with a problem 3 times as large as what America has dealt with, and they don't have a robust economy like you have. So the Chinese people are buying physical precious metals again. And now that real estate as a concept has burst, they will buy a lot more of it. And surely they're also buying silver, because you're seeing what's happening with the price of silver going close to 30, and it will go higher. After they will do it, other countries, corrupt politicians have told them fairy tales, are going to do it as well. I can see a lot of other countries that traditionally have believed in precious metals have been told otherwise, and will come back to them. So, but 1.2 billion Chinese people is quite enough to get started with.
Interesting. Now, I'm curious to get your thoughts. So gold and silver clearly is going to be something where people will start paying more attention to it, given the things you just laid out. So here in the U.S., a lot of concerns of elevated inflation will likely delay rate cuts this year. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's the case, or do you think he'll be forced to eventually if something breaks or something has already broken, or what are you thinking?
No, I think rates are going to stay high. Powell has done what he can as a central banker to eliminate the possibility of borderline hyperinflation in the United States, which we kind of saw in 2021. So that's out of the question. And that's a big risk that's been alleviated. But he cannot change one iota about the real trends that are behind inflation. All you can do is smoothen them out and make them more livable. But inflation is going to remain high for at least the next 4 or 5 years. And you're either going to keep that border open. Obviously, under Trump, it will go through a massive reform. But you either bring more workers in, which is the American way. America is English people that came here, Germans and Italians and everyone else came here for opportunity, and they keep coming here for opportunity. That is what makes America the number 1 economy in the world. It's America's market keeps growing, and you keep bringing more brain power into the country. But brain power doesn't just mean low-paid workers. It means attracting people from India that, as you know, are running some of your biggest corporations, and people that want to learn in your universities, which is debatable right now. But to keep America's excellence, you need to be the leader in artificial intelligence. And that is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity that comes with a multi-trillion-dollar spend. Jerome Powell is not going to be able to stop inflation. The government is running ginormous deficits, ginormous. And it's not going to change. When you have a country that's divided right straight down the middle, You don't get politicians that come in with large reforms because they just don't have the support. So you can bet that what you see is what you're going to get. You're going to get a lot more infrastructure, and you will need to see wages rising in order to attract boomers to not retire and stay in the workforce, or people will come in from abroad. But in either case, scenario of high interest rates and very rapid growth, which means 3% or more GDP, that's going to go on for the next 4 or 5 years. Just keep in mind, you are taking back what's yours. You're taking back all the IP, all the manufacturing, everything that you gave away to other countries for the sake of buying their friendship is coming back. You don't care about friendships anymore with all the countries in the world. You're going to have your allies, but you don't have to bribe everybody to be your friend and look away when they reverse engineer your products or steal your IP or respect your values or your laws, etc. And on the flip side, you need to go back to respecting your own laws and respecting your own values and what made you the world's #1 economy in the first place. So what I see in the next 4 or 5 years is very high inflation, which means CPI is one thing, but in general, you're going to feel about 4 to 5 to 6% inflation. And if you feel that for 4 to 5 years, that's 25% of your savings gone down the tubes. So I do think that there's a huge role for gold, hard assets, and inflationary assets first.
Interesting. Now, as we draw towards the end, I'm curious to get your thoughts on, other events unfolding right now. One of them being the Japanese yen. And so just, headline here, why is Japan's yen falling and why is it so weak against the dollar? And I know you focus on, the currency markets and things of that nature as well. What's going on here? And so is this something, because a lot of people talk about the dollar yen carry trade and things like that. And so what are your thoughts on this? And is this something that can also factor into some unforeseen plans that causes our government the Fed to have to, address them?
In going back 100 years ago to the 1920s, Japan was a agricultural society. Every family had 5 or 6 children, and that was the norm. And they had an emperor. And Woodrow Wilson, who is either the worst president in American history or second to Barack Obama, he decided that he would call the Japanese a lower class of people and created strife between America and Japan, which some of the worst atrocities in human history in the 40s, and ended with 2 atomic bombs, and a third one was already on the way. The Japanese surrendered. After that, they changed their entire way of life. There's a lot of books that you can read about how that society just basically almost like a blank slate became something else. And in the 80s, their economy became so competitive that they were starting to rival the United States. But they hit a lot of demographic peaks in the early 90s. And because of that, they hit a 30-year deflationary spiral. And now they're getting their demographics under control. They're still a very aging country, but they're young, understand the problems of the last 30 years. And so you're seeing signs of inflation. And those signs of inflation in a country that's experienced a 30-year deflation is what's causing their currency to be weaker against the dollar. And the second thing that's really key is that Japan is spending like crazy on its military. It has the largest 5-year militaristic program in the world right now. And the reason is because they understand that the Chinese are coming for them. So a clash between the Japanese islands that are part of the first island chain and between the Chinese who want to unshackle themselves from the threat of the first island chain is going to create a lot of chaos in that region.
Interesting there. So based upon the current activity, what you see happening right now, do you continue to see that Japanese yen being devalued against the dollar moving forward? And could it basically breaking, could that lead to some type of systemic event in your opinion?
No, the Japanese have one of the most robust and complex and successful economies in the world. And as I said, they're getting stronger. They're getting more relevant. They will start to project power outside of their region. They will effectively form new alliances around the world, and they will go back to being a regional power.
Interesting. Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. And so, Lior, I guess we covered some of the hot topics of this worth definitely bring to the audience. And so, anything else that is of importance that you think that people should know about, or anything of that magnitude before we sign off for today?
I mean, why not tell them that my portfolio is open to you? You can download it at wealthresearchgroup.com/portfolio. That portfolio from 2022, just in the last 2 years, has almost doubled. I think that you should take a look at it. Secondly, I wrote a very nice report about Klaus Schwab, everyone's favorite person. So I definitely take a look at that. I think that you will learn a lot about him at wealthresearchgroup.com/Klaus. Other than that, if you're not a subscriber to the free newsletter, you should be. So you can do that on the homepage. at wealthresearchgroup.com. And if you like, the newsletter is basically like 3 interviews a week that you get, but in congested form of 5 to 6 minute reads.
Good deal. Well, as always, Lior, it's a great to connect with you and tap into your brain and your wealth of knowledge. I appreciate you as always for joining me, and looking forward to connecting with you in a couple months and see where we're at that point as we get close to the election. And yeah, we'll have more, I guess, information to base our analysis upon as far as where we're heading and where we are. So thanks as always for joining me on RTD interviews, my friend.
Thank you very much.